was a teenager, my parents would usually visit our relative's house and stay over there during the Easter holiday. I was never stoked about it because there wasn't much to do over there. I told my parents I wanted to stay home this Easter. I was fortunate that my parents were the nicest people on the planet because they allowed me to stay home, as long as I followed standard protocol like not answering strangers. I remember having the entire place to myself. It was nice having some private time. My parents only wanted me to do my chores and finish my homework, which was easy enough to comply with. Then, at 1 in the morning, while sitting on the couch watching one of my favorite TV shows, I remembered I had to take out the trash for the garbage men to pick up when it was time for them to drop by the street. So, I gathered up all the trash bags inside the house and diligently brought them out. Then, moments later, a car pulled up in front of the driveway, creeping me out quite a bit. I knew my parents weren't scheduled to come home so soon, so I knew it couldn't have been them. I had no idea who this person was. It was like a silver Honda or something like that. The door and windows remained closed the whole time. The lights were kept on and the vehicle was running while parked in the middle of the street. Then, moments later, I heard the door click. And when it swung open, a person who appeared to be an old hag emerged from the car. Her hair was long, disheveled and gray. She wore a long black dress, staring at me from a distance. Her eyes were blank and round. Then, seconds later, her lips curled into a maniacal smile. I was in shock, my entire body paralyzed by fear. This type of scenario was something I often saw on television, so having experienced it myself, I didn't think it would stir me up this much. And while my mind was trying to process what was happening, I didn't know what to do. Then suddenly, my heart dropped when the creepy old woman dashed toward me. The old woman was mere inches away from grabbing me before I ran inside the house and slammed the door shut, locking it immediately. The woman then started pounding at the door, laughing like a psycho.
Stay away from me, you freak! I'll call the cops! I swear!
Despite my doubts, I tried to be more assertive, hoping this crazy old hag would leave me alone. Then, a few seconds later, the banging and laughing stopped. I then peeked through the curtains on the window and saw the woman going through my mailbox. I wanted to cuss the lady out but knew better than to open the window, afraid she would suddenly attack me. So, my best option was to call my parents. As I was about to dial my parents' number, I could see the creep still rummaging in the mailbox, giggling like a lunatic. There was nothing funny about what she was doing. Maybe she felt like she had achieved something by invading our mailbox. Then, moments later, the creep finally walked away, oddly satisfied by what she did. As she returned to her car, I immediately called my parents and told them everything. My parents were worried and told me to stay put and to keep all the doors and windows locked until they arrived home. That's when I saw the creep finally drive off. I felt like a weight had been lifted off of my shoulders, allowing me to breathe again. I sat on the couch and waited hours upon end. With each ticking of the clock, I grew restless, afraid the old woman would suddenly return and back up and decide to break into the house. About an hour later, my parents finally arrived home. They immediately consoled me and vowed to never let me stay home alone again. After telling them what the creep did to our mailbox, my parents looked at each other, understandably confused. That's when my dad decided to take a peek inside the mailbox. But before exiting the front door, my mom was a bit reluctant, afraid the old lady might have snuck a bomb or hazardous device inside it. That's when my parents called the cops to have them investigate it. When they arrived, they cautiously opened it and reached inside. As the officer brushed away the envelopes, setting them aside, he found what appeared to be an Easter egg. It was colorful with a splash of pink, yellow, blue, and white. It looked like an ordinary decorated Easter egg. However, as the officer opened it and saw the contents, his expression turned sour. When my mom took a closer look, she immediately told me to look away. Moments later, my parents told me that it was a bunch of graphic content hidden inside the Easter egg. There were small photos that were unpleasant and disturbing. Enraged, my parents made a police report and demanded that they find the culprit. A few days after the incident, my parents got an update from the police, telling us that they had identified the woman and that they had taken her into custody. It was alleged that the woman had put the same Easter eggs in multiple people's mailboxes around the neighborhood. When the a bizarre old lady was being questioned at the police station, she insisted that she had nothing but good intentions and that what she did wasn't a crime. In fact, she justified that the only reason she filled the Easter eggs with such graphic content was that she wanted to educate people. Since then, I could never look at Easter the same way again. Whenever I saw an Easter egg, I would always be reminded of that strange old woman staring at me with a sinister smile. This story was inspired by a case regarding a 42-year-old Florida woman. She was accused of placing plastic eggs into people's mailboxes that contained graphic images. It was alleged that she had delivered over a whopping 400 Easter eggs. When they asked why she did it, her answer was that she was trying to educate people.
When I was a teenager, I went to visit my grandfather for Easter. I always dreaded visiting my grandpa's house on my mother's side of the family, because he was always a mean, bitter old pain in the neck for as long as I can remember. But in the last years of his life, he got even worse. He had some kind of dementia that made him act extremely strange. I was somehow supposed to be used to him spacing out and mumbling gibberish to himself by that point. But obviously as a kid, there's no adjusting to that sort of thing. It's easy to imagine why I didn't want to spend my entire holiday with him, which amounted to several days and nights at his creepy old house. Even my mom didn't want to go see her own father. Her and my dad always had arguments the night before we left. She was understandably distraught, and looking back on it now, I'm sure there was a lot of childhood trauma she wanted to avoid. My dad was adamant though, always guilt-tripping us, constantly telling us how my grandpa didn't have much years left in him and that we would regret it when he passed. Obviously, that fight put even more of a dark shadow over the whole trip before it even started, and once we got there, I knew right away that it was going to be worse than I thought. My grandpa was in rough shape physically, but mentally more than anything. He was very weird. I avoided him as much as I could, but during the time that I was forced to spend with him, I never once saw him get up from his easy chair. He spent most of the time with us just mumbling gibberish to himself while staring up at the ceiling. It was like his pupils were glued to the top of his eyelids and he couldn't have looked down if he wanted to. Needless to say, none of us were very happy campers on this trip, and it still didn't get better at night when we all went to bed. I was given my mom's childhood room to sleep in, and the second I saw it, I started to understand why my mom was a little crazy. In my mom's childhood bedroom was a life-size Easter bunny costume, standing right across the foot of the bed. I couldn't fathom how my mom was able to sleep here at night. And why the hell did my grandpa keep this thing here? All these unanswered questions made me feel even more uncomfortable than I already was. I definitely didn't want to sleep there, but I didn't have much of a choice. My only other option was to sleep on the couch in the living room, but I was too scared of Grandpa wandering around in the middle of the night in one of those dementia sleepwalking episodes, so I needed to have a door I could lock just to feel safe. It wasn't easy to sleep in that room though. The costume stared right at the bed. I thought about moving it out of the way, but I was realistically worried that Grandpa would freak out if I altered anything in his house, and I was also less realistically worried that the thing was alive and would wake up if I touched it. For those reasons, I just dealt with it. The first couple nights, I struggled to sleep. I would literally hide under the covers, but on the last night, things were a little different. I was excited about leaving in the morning, which made it even harder to sleep, and that bunny was still there, which also made it very hard to sleep. I couldn't figure out what, but I could have sworn there was something different about it. Whatever it was, I was curious about it. After not sleeping for a few hours, I got out of bed and walked over to it. I looked it up and down, and got really close to see if there were any details about it that had changed. For the most part, I couldn't tell. But for the few seconds that my face was close to its face, I knew, undeniably, I could hear it breathing. It reached out and grabbed me. It then lifted me up in the air and started violently shaking me, all the while screaming like crazy. I'm dead! Please help me! I fought back, but all my blows were softened by the fabric. It was all useless until I managed to plant my feet against him and push him back with all my might. The monster finally dropped me and I hit the ground. I scrambled to my feet while the Easter Bunny staggered backwards. Then, I sprinted out of the room and ran to my parents. I started to explain what was going on, but my mom barely let me get a word out. Mom! The Easter Bunny's alive! It's alive!
Oh my god! I knew this would happen!
What do you mean?
Never mind. Let's just go. I'll get your things together.
And just like that, we left Grandpa's house in the middle of the night with all our luggage. I never saw him again. He didn't last much longer after that anyway. He died just a few months later. For years, I held on to the secret of what I thought happened. For all I knew, that thing really was alive and tried to kill me. But obviously that wasn't true. Later on, when I turned 18, my mom sat me down and explained the reality. When she was a kid, Grandpa used to dress up in that Easter Bunny costume and stand in her room at night, just watching to make sure she was asleep. And if she woke up, he would attack her. She thought he had stopped doing that when she got older, but when his mental condition deteriorated to the point that it did, that nasty old habit came back, and I had to experience it. That was a lot to take in. It was my own grandfather watching me at night, like a total maniac. It was him behind the mask, and the Easter Bunny scarred me for life.
Around the time that this happened, I was a very gullible teenager that didn't have any friends outside of school. My parents were mostly absent from my life, so I got used to entertaining myself and taking care of my basic needs. But it wasn't like I lived in a hard neighborhood that taught me street smarts or anything. I was just a weird suburban loner. During spring break one year, I would find myself wandering around the mall. I wouldn't do much besides window shop and walk around till my legs started cramping up. That's when I saw the Easter Bunny area had already been set up ahead of the holiday. I knew I was a little too old to be getting those kinds of pictures taken, but I guess I was jealous of everyone else who got to go with their parents, which is something I was never able to do with my own. When I got in line, I was moving along at a good pace. I then noticed that most of the kids who were getting their picture taken weren't spending much time with the Easter Bunny. A lot of them were running away screaming and crying after just a few seconds. This, however, didn't raise any red flags, just because I assumed it was a bunch of wimpy kids that got coerced by their parents into taking a picture with the bunny. When it was finally my turn, I walked over to the Easter Bunny and heard him say something like,
Have a seat on my lap. Let's make this a good memory.
I blushed with embarrassment, but I couldn't figure out why, so I just sort of went along with it.
There we are. Now smile for the camera.
That's when the bunny grabbed me around the waist and shifted me towards the middle of his lap, supposedly to face me in the right direction. However, that wasn't the only weird thing that happened. As the photographer snapped all the photos, the Easter Bunny leaned in and whispered something else, saying,
Hey little guy, would you like an Easter egg? I made them myself. They're pretty good as long as you're okay with a lot of egg whites.
Looking back, it was clear that he was taking advantage of the fact that he was wearing a mask, and that there was a lot of noise around us so that nobody could pick up on what he was saying. I should have said no, but like I said, I was gullible back then, so I said,
Sure.
Just then, the photographer gave us the signal that he was done.
Over already? What a shame. But weren't you so well behaved? I wish the rest were more like you.
The bunny then gave me a pat on the back as I got off his lap, but before I could walk away, he whispered to me again, saying,
You're the best one I've had all day, so I'll tell you what. Meet me in the bathroom over there in a few minutes, and I'll get you that Easter egg as a reward. Sound good? Yeah, thank you. No, thank you. Run along now.
I walked past the photographer and got my free photo, then went to the bathroom the bunny pointed out to me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but I really thought I was about to get some kind of prize or high-value gift. The bathroom was empty, so I sat inside one of the stalls at the back end and locked the door while I waited. A few awkward minutes passed before I heard the door open and someone walk in. But things got disturbing when I heard them lock the door. That's when I finally got the message that something was very wrong. Whoever it was that came in just trapped me in there with them. I immediately regretted ever doing this and lifted my legs up off the ground to hide. I felt like my heart was going to beat out of my chest. Suddenly, the person kicked open one of the stalls. I nearly jumped out of my skin as that horrible chill ran down my spine. I knew it was only a matter of time before they figured out which one I was in.
Stop hiding from me, you little vermin! Don't you want your prize for being so good on my lap?
That's when I heard them kicking down the stall door right next to me. I was so afraid that I started biting my nails to keep still. Things got quiet except for the sound of my heart pounding in my skull. I slowly looked up, expecting to see the face of the Easter Bunny looking down at me, but he wasn't there. I started to feel the slightest bit of relief, until the most nightmarish sight became reality. I looked down to see him looking up at me from under my stall door. I screamed as he grabbed me by my feet and pulled me off the toilet. I kicked and squirmed and struggled as he dragged me out from under the stall.
Help! Somebody help me! Nobody's getting in here, so just shut up!
He dragged me over to one of the open stalls and started pulling me into it. In that moment, I was able to pry his fingers off of me and break free and get the hell out of there. I ran to the door and unlocked it, pulling it open and sprinting outside into the mall just in time. Everything else was a blur as the scene developed in the public, with everybody coming to my aid and finding out what happened. The Easter Bunny tried to get away, but obviously he was pretty identifiable and got tracked down and arrested within a few minutes. As it turns out, the man who was playing the Easter Bunny was a well-known predator with several outstanding warrants, who managed to lie his way into getting the role, just so he could target more innocent civilians. This story was inspired by a case revolving around a 53-year-old man who lied his way into getting the mall Santa and Easter Bunny gig, just so he could prey on the vulnerable. The image below is a mugshot of the culprit. It was said that he was linked to multiple assaults and counting.